fast forward to about 2 or 3 years later. I'm in about my mid-20s now. And, I'm just meeting people. I'm enjoying my life. I'm trying new things. I still pray. I still go to a church, and my level intimacy with God is still pretty surface level, right? That relationship part, I still don't talk to God about. Like, I still don't include him in this part of my life. I don't surrender it. And it was something that I didn't realize at the time I was supposed to do it. So then I get into another relationship in my mid-20s. And this relationship was that relationship that really shifted everything for me, right? So when I met that boyfriend at the time, and me navigating, me standing on, like, really, I'm not doing this. Like, I'm not sleeping with anyone. I'm just going to date. I'm really waiting. But I wanted to still date someone. I still wanted to be, like, I'm still young. And that was my mindset, right? I wasn't thinking about, is this a purposeful person? I'm just young and immature, and you just want to have fun. You're not trying to sleep with people to have fun. You're just having fun. You're going out. And when I met that boyfriend at the time, well, when we first met, and I vocalized that, hey, I'm waiting. And he was like, oh, okay, so you are. And I said, yes, I'm going to tell you this up front. And I remember how he was saying, yeah, I can respect that. And that's a whole other thing, because that will continue down the line of how I've dealt with relationships and realizing, like, I have to move a little differently now. But I remember him saying, I respect that. And I said, okay, here we go. Well, after he told me that he wasn't quite ready to be in a relationship, he had things to work out, my blind and optimism, right? And I was naive. I was like, but we're best friends, because we built such a great friendship. Like, we were friends first, and then we got together. And I just felt like, let's just be together. And mind you, I'm not praying about any of this stuff. And mind you, he already told me he's not he's not in a place to be in he's not ready for a serious relationship like this. And I didn't care. When you want what you want, you're not consulting God. You're kind of just moving how you move. You do what you do. And I remember when he left, because he was living in another state, he came back, and I was like, I'm going to do it with this guy. Like, as much as I literally told him my plans, I was like, no, I'm going to do it. I am. He didn't do anything to me that I knew, like, oh, this is a guy that's, like, trying to pressure me. He wasn't. The problem was, even though I vocalized, it's so crazy that I'm looking back at this, even though I vocalized that I wanted to stop and that I'm not going to do it, I didn't know about boundaries. So this is what I'm saying. This stuff it's levels to this, man. I didn't know. I would, like, be with him and hang out, and we would kiss every once in a while, and then we would kind of do everything but that. And then it was such a messy kind of thing. And so I wasn't doing anything like, taking off clothes. It wasn't anything like that, but just still really, like, crazy situations, having to stop, like, oh no, let's stop. And so you're feeding, what I didn't realize what I was doing was I'm feeding the lust. I'm giving into the temptation. I'm not having boundaries. I'm not talking to anybody about this. I'm trying to just figure this out. I'm not praying about it. I'm just saying I don't want to do it, but yet my actions, my actions are doing something completely different. And when I finally decided, oh no, I'm going to do this with him. And there was no consulting God. There was no prayer. I just decided that this is what I'm going to do. And it happened. And, that situation lasted for years. Because not only did he pre-warn me he wasn't ready for a relationship, I was telling the guy, I won't go into all the details, but I was telling him, no, it's going to work out. It'll be fine. But we had such a deep friendship, he really believed in me. I believed in him. We really helped each other out. And that's the thing too. God will put you with certain people in your life. And even if it doesn't work out, there's still beauty in some of these relationships, even when they do end. And one thing I will say about my early 20s, I was traveling a lot. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I just knew it's like, okay, and I'm still learning with my relationship with God. I'm still learning. Now I'm active and it's like, hey, I'm in this relationship with this guy. I'm doing whatever we're doing. Then I find out about infidelity. And so that shifted our whole dynamic of our relationship, because I felt like, so you mean to tell me that I'm making a commitment to you and that's what you go and do to me? So it was this such a really intense relationship I had with this person. And to this day, like, I'm grateful for the lessons, because even though it broke my heart, it woke me up. So this person who I was with, I ended up moving to where he lived, into another state. And I moved, I still was optimistic about us, very naive. I didn't even pray to God about the move. I just moved, right? He moved for me. I moved for him. I'm just moving. I'm moving. So this is where like my relationship with God was just still very much like, oh, I still go to church. I still do this. And eventually I am living in another state. I don't want to, first of all, a rule I never wanted to break, and I still have not broke it, was like actually living with a man, paying bills with a guy, like, full on playing house. I didn't want to do that, and I didn't. Ended up finding a place after about 2 weeks, found a place, stayed there, rented out a room, and, was still doing purposeful things here and there. And, one thing I realized during that part of my journey was, I'm glad that I stuck to my boundaries. I finally had boundaries. Even though I literally was still in sin, there were just certain things I wasn't willing to do, right? I was proud of myself. Now that I think back about it, I'm so proud of myself, little Debbie, for making that decision. Because 3 months into me moving, he breaks up with me. He says, hey, I just cannot do this. I cannot. It had nothing to do with us sleeping together. That's the craziest. And so I ended up staying for 2 more years. God still opened doors. I was doing very well. So that's the thing. Even though things ended with him, we still were active every once in a while. Let's be real. It was one of those situations where you come over, you're friendly, you're whatever. It was such a slippery slope. I got to a point where after 2 years, even though I did so many amazing things in that state, and I felt like it's just time for a change. Mind you, I'm not praying about any of these decisions. And that's why like this journey has been but then what I realized was I had such a deep, dark depression moment down there, and I couldn't get out of bed. And I remember how he was telling me about his own stuff. And that's when I realized that I didn't realize this until later, but it started already happening, that all the things he was dealing with internally started to come into my spirit as well. And so there was a darkness over my spirit that I've never had before. And eventually I left to another state. I just packed up the car because I remember when I was telling him I'm moving. Like, I'm moving. I'm not renewing my lease. I'm not staying here. And I remember him just kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. And I feel like I was really starting to get closer to God during that season because, one, I was getting really low mentally. And I watched this sermon called Get Involved. Get Involved. And I felt led to start a small group. In the middle of all of that, I decided I really feel led to start a small group. I was already in one in my early 20s. And I was like, okay, I think I could, I really feel led to do this. So I went through the training and I went through, all of that. But I knew something has to change. So this is about 2017. And I was like, all right, this just has to stop. This has to stop. And I remember even the last time I was I was active. And I feel like, I got to a point where the conviction, the way I felt, the way God was convicting my heart, it was like God wanted me to reach for him, but I just didn't know how, or just wasn't ready, or whatever it was. But I still was taking steps. I just knew I had to get out. Even though things were prospering there, I knew if I stay close to this person, I will never be able to get free of what I need to get free of to get to the next. And so I became a small group leader. That was the last time I was active with that person. And basically what happened was I decided that I'm just going to pack up and I'm going to move. And I didn't consult God. This is why it's so important to consult God about these things, because while you think you're just moving throughout your life, you're not really telling God your plans. But he's still covering you. And that's the thing that I was learning. Like, I was starting to get in my word a little bit more. I was, really starting to understand what it meant to have a relationship with God. And, now I'm becoming this leader and I'm figuring out my life, and I felt like, do I know how to lead someone? Am I good? You doubt yourself because you've never done it before. I was, in my 20s still. And I was like, what if I get someone that's older? Is it, I was doubting myself. But I remember my mother was saying, like, you got this. Like, you got this. If you're truly meant to do this, do it. And so I had my first meeting with the girls, and it was a virtual. So it was an online small group. The reason why I mentioned a small group is because through that small group and through these next steps, that's when things really started to evolve. Because from the moment I was a little girl all the way up to my 20s, I was just kind of doing whatever, saying whatever, going wherever. But then when I moved in 2018, when I finally moved away, God started speaking to me on another level. My faith started shifting on another level. I started praying more on another level. And God started giving me dreams on another level. And even though I didn't know how to deal with getting away from a situation that was no longer healthy for me, I just knew that it was time to keep making steps. And that's the thing. It's not an overnight process. I still had certain things that I was doing. I still had so much more growing to do. And one of the things that I learned was, I had to let go of certain toys, certain video. Like, there was a lot more than just, oh, you're not doing it anymore. It was the thoughts you were having. Right? It was like how people crave things like cookies and stuff like, it's all of that. It's a real cleansing of your mind more than anything else, even more than your body. And, so one of the things once 2018 came around and I moved and I got the visions, and I'm really still going after purpose. I'm really trying to do different things. I'm meeting different people. And my ex at the time was still following me to the States. So you got to think there's still that, but God was speaking to me through dreams that this guy is still dealing with other people and he's still wanting to deal with you. And I didn't slip up. I didn't, no. I stayed the course. But he was up in my face. He made a way to get still to see me and I still entertained it. I wasn't at a place yet to truly cut it off. And that took years. I'm going to tell you that it took years, because when you're bonded with someone, and I didn't realize this, but when you're bonded with someone, it really does take the blood of Jesus to break that bond with someone, because it doesn't just happen over. And this is with family, friends, whatever. And so I'm walking this out and I'm leading my small group and things are going well. I'm learning, I'm growing. It's new, it's interesting. And then all of a sudden I moved back to Maryland, where I'm from. And that's 2018. And I said to myself, okay, so I'm moving back. I had a job. I was working catering. I was doing so many different things. I was working with a real estate investor, and then I was doing catering and, doing content, doing so many things. And then I moved back because, unfortunately, he had to let my position go. And I was just like, all right, my mother was having a medical situation going on. And I was like, okay, I just got into a car accident, literally. And this is after God spoke to me. And so when I moved back to Maryland, this is where God really started showing up on another level. Because when I moved back, I remember about 3 weeks in, I got a new job. Literally, just got a new job. Still wasn't really consulting God about a lot of this stuff, man. I just was kind of moving and doing whatever. Still had struggles every once in a while. I still had a lot of issues. And I moved to Maryland. And while in Maryland, my relationship with God got stronger. Because now I'm back at my home base. I didn't want to be there for long, but I was there. I still was there. And I remember working at a hotel. Like, I was working at a hotel, and I was just kind of living life, and praying and going to church and doing that, and God's working on my heart. And I remember this is where you start to get self-awareness. There was a fitness class that I loved. It was for women because I used to go to the gym. And you want to talk about lust. I've had to let go of a lot of things. And one of the things was a fitness class that I loved. It was, they did all types of classes, but there was one class I really, really loved. It was a chair class. And I said to myself, this is so fun, and I told myself, this is a great way to get exercise. This is fun. It's whatever. I'm not doing anything wrong, but Holy Spirit started convicting me. The music, the movement, and I had to stop going to the class. Like, literally, I was there all the time for like a month, like 3 or 4 months, always there. And there was that conviction about, this isn't right. You can't do this anymore. And I still was listening to certain music. I don't listen to a lot of like crazy music or explicit music, but my spirit was starting to get really I was grieving what I was listening to and what I was doing. And so I literally just left. I didn't say anything to the teacher. I just kind of left the class. And, I was one of the, I always was there. And I remember, I'll never forget this. She saw me at another class. I was like doing Zumba or kickboxing or something like that. And she is like, oh my gosh, Debbie, I haven't seen you in forever. Are you ever coming back? And I was like, yeah, no, I have other things going on, and that's not people's business to tell. You don't have to tell people every little thing that you're doing. But I felt the Holy Spirit. That was one of the first real things that I realized, oh crap, I have to let this go, because this is feeding something that I'm trying to kill. And so that was one of the things I had to do. Another thing that I had to do was I had to let go of sleeping with my phone in my room. So sometimes there were times where I realized, okay, I'm not doing anything with anyone. But the phone can be a temptation, right? There were times where I would fall. And I remember how I had to really talk to even the women in my group about what I did, like the things that I struggled with, right? Now I'm being consistent at this point. But I remember how I would talk to them, and some of them, just to be honest, some of them, they had boyfriends or they were dating, and they decided, even though they love Jesus and they're out, they still wanted to do their thing. Now, some leaders would, come down on them and how dare you? And I remember I said, I don't want to be that leader. I'd rather pray for them. I'd rather be an example for them. And I'd rather stay the course, because now I'm in a leadership position. That means I have to live right. I cannot say one thing and act in a fool. Now, it doesn't mean I still wasn't acting a fool, because I still had other areas in my life that God had to work on. But me really telling them that I have had struggles. I have had to stop. And I remember a few of the ladies that I met, they were like, and some of my friends, like, I admire you. Like, I admire that you're waiting. I mean, oh my goodness, I don't know. And, and it gets hard. It really gets hard to continue to wait, to continue to not know what's happening. And God showed up in a really interesting way where I met a guy on a metro. And the reason why I mention this is because sometimes throughout your life you're meeting people, you don't even know why things are happening. And I remember I met this guy, and he was on the metro right around the same time I was, and there was just something pulling at my spirit, and we ended up sitting right next to each other. Long story short, we'll go into all the details, but I met him and I was like, wow, God. So this is where now I'm starting to talk to God about a person, because the spirit inside of me was so strong towards this person that I was like, God, what was that? And he and I ended up talking and, off the metro. And it was a whole thing. And I found out he was a content creator as well. And he did Christian content. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I was doing artist content and business content. And I was just like, wow, we ended up just talking to each other, again. And I was like, who is this person? Like, I really felt this what is going on? I'm really trying to, live right. I'm trying to, but it forced me. One thing I loved about that relationship, even though it never turned into a deep friendship, me and him never really talked. And I think we only talked on the phone twice, if that. And it was a short-lived situation. And it taught me to start to talk to God about my love life, talk to God about my everything. I started to include him in on things. And I feel like that's one of the things that I never did before. And so once I realized, like, the guy, he was like, there's something about you too, Debbie. There's something about you. And he talked about something called consecration. He's like, I need a confirmation, because I felt like I felt it in my spirit too, that I needed to talk to you. And I was like, okay. And I remember how, he's like, I need to just kind of take a step back. And so I've never met, and then he also was waiting. So this is the first now male I met that also, according to what he's saying, I can't verify anything, but at least according to what he was saying, he's waiting as well. He's living for God. He's doing his ministry stuff. He's, working in DC or whatever. And I was thinking to myself, like, wow, this is going to be something. So we both got confirmation that, yeah, we were supposed to meet each other. But there was something that he did. To this day, I never met a guy that did this. Like another level of commitment and discipline. He was like, Debbie, I really like you. The problem is, and this is where still with my walk, it's really important, because it taught me something meeting him. He said, I like you, but I can't date you. I can't do this, because one thing I've never done is really giving God my single life, like really commit. Because what happens is I meet someone and I like them, and then I get caught up, and I really can't do this with you. But I do like you. That's the thing. That's what makes this hard, is I like you. But if I say yes, I feel like I'm going to let God down, and I can't do that. And I'm not going to lie, when you meet someone that's so committed to their walk with God that they deny their own desire, they deny their own flesh, it wasn't easy for me to hear that, but it was a great, now looking back, I needed to see that that was possible for a person to put God before anything. And I think even for him, it tested him too. It tested, because I remember I was telling God, I was like, God, after all the situation I dealt with in my early 20s and my late 20s, if a guy is not ready, or if he's like, hey, I'm walking away, and I'm going to have faith that there'll be more. And that's exactly, and God tested that. And then God tested him about, okay, what if you meet someone, but you know you need to concentrate on me and you? What are you going to do? And so we ended up walking away. It wasn't easy because for me, it felt like, where am I going to find someone else that gets what I'm deciding to do, like gets me? And, I started watching his videos and stuff like that. And I really felt called to eventually talk about my own stuff, like maybe do a video on my faith. I never talked about my faith like that, not really. And I was like, no, I'm not ready for that. But eventually I realized that after that situation went down, I just kept praying to God. I would keep dating. I would keep, and then I would also, I would actually have the women in my small group as my accountability. So if I had a weakness moment, if I was anything, I would talk to them. And mind you, I'm their leader. So you would think, well, you're a leader, you wouldn't talk to these. No, I did. Because it doesn't matter. I'm still human. I'm no better than anyone else. Like, yes, maybe I'm, really sticking through this path. It doesn't mean it's easy for me. And I remember how God was just working on me. God was just working on my spirit. And, going back to right around me working at the hotel, and, things were kind of getting a little shaky there. And I remember I met someone that I kind of liked again. Like, there was another person that I liked. And the problem was, this wasn't the problem. I communicate, but I always had a level to how I realized, actually, one of the lessons I learned was, you don't have to tell everyone your decision with God. When you're walking this out, when you're deciding, okay, I'm honoring God with my body, I'm waiting, everybody doesn't get to deserve to know that. Okay. And I had to learn that too. Like, everybody, there should be like a screening situation before you just blurt it out, And so I started learning that. And so I was talking to guys. I was just saying, hey, saying how things were and stuff like that. And, nothing else kind of popped off really at that time. And I remember how 2019 came around, and, now we're kind of getting into me meeting someone. So I met someone else, and this is where another shifting happened, where boundaries got a little messy. But I was doing the best I can, but it really did mess me up, because I knew, when you know stuff, but sometimes you just got to go through it to know you got to go through it to get the lesson. Met someone, and, really cool person. We, liked each other, went out a couple times, and, we were right on the cuff of like, are we going to be together? Are we not? And he knew that I told him, because once I realized, I was like, okay, so we're going to like try to really do this thing called possibly, mind you, I still wasn't praying to God about this, but I always was vocal about my waiting. And the thing is, I meet this guy, and, we're hanging out. He's like, I like you, Debbie. There's just something about you. I like you. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's cool. And he knows that I'm waiting. He's like, okay, I've never done this before. I don't know what this is like. And you could tell that his walk with God wasn't, he knew of God, but he didn't know God, right? God was maybe his savior, but not his Lord. Let's be real. And I feel like, I was getting more and more mature in my walk with God, like getting serious, like really praying, writing in my word, like really devotional, like really getting deep, right? And there was an incident where waiting until, man, this stuff it's not easy for everybody. So some of my insecurities from the past about infidelity came up, And I thought that the person that I was interested in had someone at their house. I freaked out and I popped over and I said, hey, just seeing how things are going. And he was confused. He's like, what in the world are you doing? And I played it off, basically tried to play it off. And he saw right through it. He's like, I know you came over my house for something else. And it was really inappropriate, to be honest. And I remember how, like, I told him, I said, I'm not coming to your apartment. Like, that's my boundary. And then, like, one night I got, like, comfortable. Oh, let me, like, be here. It's kind of getting late. And so this is where, like, you have boundaries, but then you go back on your own boundaries. I'm repeating the same mistake I've made before. Like, I'm not doing anything physical with it. I just literally was like, oh, I'm not gonna. But then he even asked me. I still remember to this day. He's like, you sure you want to come upstairs? I was like, yeah, I could just sit. And I sat, and it was fine. And then we left out, and that was that. But then because I opened up that door, it started to get comfortable staying there. I think one night I slept over. We didn't do anything. We literally kissed, and that was it. And he went back into his room and whatever. He never did anything to me. I never did anything to him. But after the night when I was insecure about whether or not he was maybe talking to someone else, even though he really was into me, I still had, when you have unresolved trauma and there are trigger things and, you don't deal with certain things, stuff like this happens. So he calls me the next day. He's like, I don't know what happened to you last night, and I don't know why you did that, but at this point, you're a tease, and I don't think I could deal with you. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I know we're like, you're waiting. I get it. But can we do something? And he's just asking, like, can we, like, is there some type of thing else we can do? Because at this point, it's too much for me. And I was like, it's too much for you. Okay. All right, bet. And that was it. That was it for me. I said, oh, okay, that's it. And there were other signs where he was in a season where he was really trying to, I won't even get into all his details because I don't know his full story, but from what I knew was he was at a reset in his life. A lot of good things happened, but then some not so great things happened, and he was rebuilding, right? And I met him then. And, we had fun and had lots of laughs, but there was something in my spirit was like, I don't know if it's going to get anything deeper than this. And when he told me, like, if you don't do something, like, I don't think this is going to work, that's when another rejection happens again. So there was a reoccurring rejection that happens where it's like, if you don't do this thing, I don't think it's going to work. So I was like, okay, great. Here we go again. So I walked away. And then 2020 came. And I realized that while I was working on my relationship with God, my spiritual father, I realized there was some healing with my earthly father I needed to do. And that's the good thing about the relationship which you have with God is he exposes all areas, even areas that you're trying to hide. And how does this relate to me waiting? Because it's helping heal every part of me and not just the lust and the thoughts and it's becoming a whole other person. And so one of the things that I did was I sought out therapy. And I remember I started therapy actually even before 2020, right maybe at the top of or the end of 2019. I started looking for a therapist. I had a woman therapist for a while, and didn't really work out the way I thought. Then I ended up getting with my current therapist right now, and it just worked. Like from the first session I had with him, and ended up with a male therapist of all people, right? And it worked because he was direct. I wanted him to be a mediator with me and my father. And I won't go into details about all of that, but I will say having that relationship and having that, I told myself at the time that I have to do this for a version of me that I do not even know. And I couldn't do it for the version of Debbie that was standing right there. But I knew, I was like, in order to evolve to the next person of me, I have to do some more healing. but I also want to resolve some things. So if I'm going to ever be a wife, if I'm ever going to be a mom, it doesn't matter what next is that God has for me. It's time to do some inner work. So it's time to confront this thing that I've been hiding for years. And maybe that'll be another testimony I go into. But for now, I did start therapy. And boy, was it interesting. And God was able to work through me in that situation because it didn't turn out the way I thought, honestly. I thought things were going to just kind of, okay, you're going to set things up, the person's going to show up, and it really did trigger other things, and it really wasn't a great situation.